I never expected a phone call about kitchen cabinets to destroy my family, but that's exactly what happened on a Tuesday evening in March. My sister Sarah's voice crackled through the speaker as I stirred pasta sauce for dinner, demanding $12,000 for her renovation project. When I explained that money was tight with my own mortgage and kids' expenses, she laughed bitterly. 20 minutes later, my mother called with words that felt like a punch to the gut. "Your daughters aren't welcome at our anniversary ceremony next month." The kitchen suddenly felt ice cold, despite the stove's warmth. The drive to my parents' house in suburban Denver felt longer than usual. Jessica sat beside me, her fingers drumming nervously against the passenger door, while our 8-year-old twins Emma and Sophie chattered excitedly in the back seat about seeing their grandparents. They had no idea we were heading into what would become the most painful family confrontation of my life. I pulled into the familiar driveway of the modest ranch house where I'd grown up. The same cracked concrete steps led to the front porch, the same faded blue paint peeled from the shutters. For 10 years, I'd been helping maintain this place after Dad's heart attack nearly bankrupted them. Every month, $1,400 left my account to cover their mortgage. Another $200 went to their car insurance, $350 to their medical premiums, and $180 for utilities. It had become as automatic as breathing. Sarah's silver SUV was already parked on the street. Through the living room window, I could see her gesticulating wildly while talking to our parents on the couch. Her husband Derek lounged in Dad's recliner, and their 16-year-old son Tyler sat hunched over his phone at the dining table. "Remember, we stay calm," Jessica whispered as we unbuckled the girls. "Whatever happens in there." The front door opened before we could knock. Mom stood there with her arms crossed, her gray hair pulled back in the same tight bun she'd worn for 20 years. The welcoming smile I usually received was nowhere to be found. "Marlon," she said stiffly, barely glancing at Jessica or the girls. "We need to talk." The living room felt cramped with all of us gathered there. Dad sat in his usual spot on the worn brown sofa, his hands folded in his lap. At 68, he looked older than his years, the stress of his health problems etched in the lines around his eyes. Sarah perched on the arm of the couch, like a bird ready to take flight, her blonde hair perfectly styled, despite the tension in the room. "Show him the receipts," Sarah said without preamble, thrusting a manila folder toward me. I opened it to find neatly organized invoices from Home Depot, Lowe's, and various contractors. Cabinet installation, countertop replacement, new appliances. The total came to exactly $12,000. "I've been taking care of Mom and Dad while you've been playing house in your suburban paradise," Sarah continued, her voice rising. The kitchen was falling apart. The cabinet doors wouldn't close, the countertop had water damage, and the refrigerator was making noises like a dying animal. "Sarah," I started, but she held up her hand. "I fronted the money because they needed it done immediately. Now I need you to reimburse me. It's only fair since you're the one with the fancy job and the big salary." I glanced at my parents, waiting for them to speak up, to explain that I'd been covering their major expenses for a decade. Instead, Mom looked down at her hands while Dad cleared his throat uncomfortably. "The thing is, son," Dad said slowly, "we promised Sarah we'd help with the renovation costs. We told her months ago that we'd cover it." My stomach dropped. "With what money?" Sarah smirked. "With the money you've been sending them, obviously. Don't act like you don't know how family finances work. I send that money for their mortgage and bills," I said, trying to keep my voice level. "Not for renovations." "Oh, please." Sarah laughed, and Derek chuckled from the recliner. "You act like you're some kind of saint for helping your parents. I've been here every week taking Mom to doctor appointments, helping Dad with his physical therapy, dealing with their problems, while you show up for Sunday dinners and think you're father of the year." Tyler looked up from his phone long enough to snicker. "Uncle Marlon thinks he's so important because he has money." The room erupted in laughter. Derek's deep guffaw mixed with Sarah's sharp cackle and Tyler's teenage snort. Even my parents smiled, though they tried to hide it. Jessica's hand found mine and squeezed tight. "Your financial priorities have always been interesting." Sarah continued, wiping tears from her eyes. Spending hundreds of dollars on piano lessons for the girls while your own parents struggle. That's fair, I said quietly. The laughter stopped. Everyone stared at me, probably expecting an argument or an angry outburst. Instead, I stood up and helped Emma and Sophie to their feet. Come on, girls, we're going home. But we just got here, Emma protested. I wanted to show Grandpa my math homework. Another time, sweetheart. As we walked to the door, Mom called after us. Marlon, we need to discuss the anniversary ceremony. We've decided that if you can't contribute to the family in meaningful ways, then perhaps your children shouldn't be part of our celebration. I stopped with my hand on the doorknob, but didn't turn around. I understand. The drive home was silent, except for the girls asking why we'd left so quickly. Jessica fielded their questions, while I focused on the road, my mind racing. That evening, after the girls were in bed, I sat at my home office desk and began pulling up bank statements on my laptop. The numbers told a story I'd been too trusting to see clearly before. 10 years of monthly transfers to my parents, dozens of emergency payments to Sarah for various crises, car repairs, medical bills, home maintenance, Tyler's school expenses. I'd been so focused on being the reliable son that I'd never questioned where all that money was actually going. But the real shock came when I looked more closely at the dates on those emergency payments. $3,200 for Sarah's car repair happened the same month I'd sent my parents an extra $500 for their own car troubles. $2,800 for Tyler's dental work occurred 2 weeks before my parents asked for help with their dental bills. The pattern was clear once I knew to look for it. My parents had been taking money from my monthly payments and giving it to Sarah for years. The mortgage, the insurance, the utilities were all legitimate. But every time I sent extra for an emergency, every time I increased my monthly support, a portion had been quietly redirected to my sister's various financial needs. I calculated the total and felt sick. Over 3 years, approximately $36,000 had made this invisible journey from my account to Sarah's projects. Money I thought was keeping my parents afloat had actually been funding my sister's lifestyle, while she played the role of the devoted daughter who sacrificed for the family. Sleep didn't come easily that night. I lay in bed staring at the ceiling, listening to Jessica's steady breathing, while my mind churned through years of family interactions with new clarity. Every guilt trip about not visiting enough, every subtle suggestion that I should be more grateful for Sarah's devotion to our parents, every request for just a little more help during tough times. By morning, I'd made my decision. I started with the automatic transfers. One by one, I canceled every recurring payment that flowed from my accounts to my parents. The mortgage payment, the insurance premiums, the utility transfers. Each cancellation felt like cutting a cord that had tied me to a sinking ship. Jessica found me at the kitchen table, surrounded by printed bank statements and a yellow legal pad covered in calculations. She set a cup of coffee beside me and sat down without a word. "How bad is it?" she finally asked. I showed her the numbers. $87,000 over 10 years. That's what I've given to my family in direct payments, emergency loans, and support. She whistled low. That's almost 2 years of your salary. And that's not counting the credit cards. Her eyebrows rose. What credit cards? I pulled out another stack of papers. I co-signed for 2 emergency credit cards for my parents 5 years ago. They were supposed to be for medical emergencies, only used sparingly, paid off quickly. I slid the statements across the table. They've been maxing them out and making minimum payments. $15,000 on each one. Jessica studied the statements, her frown deepening. These charges don't look like medical expenses. Restaurants, gas stations, department stores, cash advances. Cash advances totaling $8,000 in the past year alone. Where did that money go? I leaned back in my chair. I think I know, but I need to confirm it. The doorbell rang at 9:30, interrupting our financial autopsy. Through the window, I saw a white pickup truck in our driveway, with Thompson Construction painted on the side. A burly man, in a flannel shirt and work boots, stood on our porch, holding a clipboard. Marlon Hayes. He asked when I opened the door. That's right. Jake Thompson, Thompson Construction. I've been trying to reach you about the Hayes renovation project. Your parents gave me this address when I couldn't get through on the phone number they provided. My stomach clenched. I'm not sure what you're referring to. He consulted his clipboard. Kitchen renovation at 412 Maple Street. Your sister Sarah Hayes contracted us for the work, but she listed you as the financial guarantor. We completed the job last week, but the final payment check bounced. Your parents said you'd handle it. I never agreed to be a financial guarantor for anything. Jake's expression shifted from confusion to concern. Sir, I have your signature right here on the guarantee form. He flipped through his papers and showed me a document with what looked like my signature at the bottom. My handwriting, but not my signature. Close enough to fool someone who'd never seen the real thing, but the M in Marlin was slightly different, and the loop in the Y of Hayes was too small. Sarah had always been good at copying handwriting when we were kids, forging excuse notes for school and permission slips for field trips. This isn't my signature, I told Jake. I never signed this document and I never agreed to guarantee any payments. The color drained from his face. Sir, if you're saying this signature is forged, that's a serious legal matter. I've got $18,000 tied up in this project. $18,000, I thought the renovation cost $12,000. 12 was the initial quote, but your sister upgraded everything. Premium cabinets, instead of standard granite countertops, instead of laminate stainless steel appliances, instead of the basic models. She said you were covering it, and money wasn't an object. I invited Jake inside and called Jessica over to witness our conversation. For the next 20 minutes, he showed us photos of the renovation copies of change orders signed by Sarah, and a timeline of work that extended far beyond what anyone had mentioned to me. The original project was scheduled for 3 days, Jake explained. Your sister kept adding elements. New flooring, fresh paint, updated lighting fixtures. By the time we finished, it was a complete kitchen makeover. When did this project start? Jake checked his calendar. 6 months ago. Initial consultation was in September. Work began in October, finished last week. 6 months ago. 2 months before anyone mentioned an anniversary ceremony to me. This renovation had been planned and executed while I was being told it was an emergency necessity to help my aging parents. Mr. Thompson. I said carefully, I need you to understand that I never agreed to guarantee this project. That signature is forged. However, I want to understand the full scope of what happened here. Have you worked with my sister before? He shifted uncomfortably. Well, there was the deck project at her neighbor's house last summer. She listed you as guarantor for that one too, but it got sorted out somehow. Another forgery. Another project I'd known nothing about. What happened with that situation? Payment came through eventually, but it was touch and go for a while. Your sister said you were traveling for work and couldn't be reached directly. I thanked Jake for his honesty and promised to sort out the situation fairly, though I made it clear that any legal issues around the forged signature would need to be addressed separately. After he left Jessica, and I sat in stunned silence. She's been using your name to fund her lifestyle, Jessica said finally, while positioning herself as the devoted daughter who sacrifices everything for the family. My phone rang. Mom's number flashed on the screen. Marlin. Her voice was strained when I answered. We need your help. There's been a misunderstanding with the contractor. He's threatening to put a lien on our house. I just spoke with Jake Thompson. A long pause. Oh, Mom, did you know Sarah forged my signature on the guarantee documents? I don't know anything about signatures. I just know Sarah said you were handling the payment, and now this man is saying we owe him money we don't have. Where did you think the money for an $18,000 renovation was coming from? Another pause. Sarah said you'd approved it. She said you wanted us to have a nice kitchen for the anniversary celebration. The manipulation was elegant in its simplicity. Tell the parents that I'd approved and would pay for everything. Tell the contractor that I was guaranteeing payment. Forge documents to make it official. create a crisis that required immediate resolution, positioning herself as the victim of circumstances beyond her control. Mom, I need you to understand something. I never approved any renovation. I never agreed to pay for any renovation. And I certainly never signed any guarantee documents. But Sarah said. Sarah lied. The words hung in the air between us. In our family, we didn't use that word lightly. We talked around deception, made excuses for misunderstandings, found ways to avoid harsh truths. But there was no softer way to describe what had happened. She wouldn't lie about something like this, Mom said finally, but her voice lacked conviction. The contractor has documentation showing this project was planned 6 months ago, before anyone mentioned the anniversary to me, before anyone told me the kitchen needed emergency repairs. I could hear Dad's voice in the background asking what was happening. Mom's muffled explanation was followed by the sound of the phone being passed. Son. Dad's voice was weary. We're in a real bind here. This contractor is talking about liens and legal action. Whatever happened with the paperwork, we need to fix this situation. Dad, the contractor isn't the problem. The problem is that Sarah has been manipulating all of us for years, and it's finally caught up with her. Now that's not fair. Sarah has been stealing from you by stealing from me, I interrupted, and it stops now. The next morning brought a cascade of phone calls that revealed the true extent of the financial web Sarah had woven around our family. It started at 7:15, when my phone buzzed with Jake Thompson's number. Mr. Hayes, I hate to bother you this early, but I need to be straight with you about something. After our conversation yesterday, I did some digging into that deck project I mentioned. I was already reaching for my coffee, sensing this wouldn't be good news. Your sister listed you as financial guarantor for her neighbor's project too. Woman named Patricia Collins lives 2 houses down from your parents. $12,000 deck and patio installation last July. Let me guess, she forged my signature on that one as well. That's what it looks like now that I know what to watch for. The signature looks similar to the kitchen job, but now that you've pointed out the differences, I can see it's not quite right. My kitchen counter was becoming a crime scene of forged documents and financial fraud. What happened with the payment on that project? Your sister showed up 3 days before I was going to file a lien with cash. Said you'd wired her the money to handle it locally. I was just happy to get paid, so I didn't ask too many questions. Cash payment. 3 days before a lien filing. Sarah had been cutting it close, probably scrambling to find money from somewhere else before the legal consequences became real. Jake, I need to ask you something, and I want you to be completely honest. Have you seen this kind of thing before? Someone forging guarantee signatures? He sighed heavily. More often than you'd think, especially with family situations. Usually, it's someone trying to help relatives but going about it the wrong way. Sometimes it's someone taking advantage. The hard part is figuring out which one you're dealing with. After Jake hung up, I called my bank to check the timing of cash withdrawals from my parents' credit cards. The dates aligned perfectly. Sarah had been using those cash advances to clean up her previous forgery schemes while setting up new ones. A continuous cycle of deception that required increasingly complex financial maneuvering to maintain. At 8:30, my parents' landline rang 6 times before Dad answered, his voice thick with confusion. Marlon. The mortgage company just called. They said our payment bounced, and we're officially late for the first time in 10 years. What's going on? I canceled the automatic transfer, Dad. You did what? I canceled all the automatic transfers. The mortgage, the insurance, the utilities, all of it. The silence stretched so long, I thought the call had dropped. Finally, Dad spoke in a whisper. Son, we can't afford this house without your help. You know that. Then maybe it's time to have an honest conversation about family finances. By noon, the domino effect was in full swing. The car dealership called my parents about their auto loan, which was 3 days past due. Apparently, Derek had been collecting the insurance payments I sent, and was supposed to forward them to the dealership, but the last 2 months had somehow gone missing. Jessica found me in my office staring at a spreadsheet that tracked every financial interaction I'd had with my family over the past decade. The numbers painted a clear picture of systematic manipulation, disguised as family loyalty. "The venue called," she said, settling into the chair across from my desk. "What venue?" "The anniversary venue. They called here looking for you because your parents' number has been busy all morning." She consulted a sticky note in her hand. "Lakeside Gardens Resort. Apparently you're listed as the backup payment method for your parents' anniversary celebration." I closed my eyes. Of course I am. The final payment bounced, and they've lost the deposit. 50 people were supposed to attend next month. The woman on the phone was very apologetic but firm. No payment, no party. "Did my parents actually book this venue? Or was that Sarah's idea too?" I asked. "Your parents made the reservation 6 months ago, right around the time the kitchen renovation started. Coincidence?" Nothing about this timeline felt coincidental anymore. Sarah had orchestrated an expensive anniversary celebration that would require my financial support, while simultaneously committing me to funding an elaborate kitchen renovation without my knowledge. The venue crisis and the contractor crisis were designed to hit at the same time, creating maximum pressure for me to simply pay for everything to make the problems go away. My phone buzzed with a text from Sarah. "Stop being petty and fix this mess. Do you want Mom and Dad to lose their house over your ego?" I showed the message to Jessica, who shook her head in amazement. "Even now, she's trying to make you the villain." "That's exactly what she's doing. I'm the selfish son who's abandoning his family over money, while she's the devoted daughter trying to hold everyone together." The afternoon brought more calls. My Aunt Carol wanted to know if the anniversary party was really canceled. My cousin Mike, who'd booked a hotel room for the celebration, needed to know if he should cancel his reservation. Uncle Robert called to ask if there was anything he could do to help resolve the family situation. Each conversation required careful explanation without making my parents look like victims or villains. Yes, there had been some financial misunderstandings. No, the anniversary wasn't permanently canceled, just postponed while we worked through some issues. Yes, everyone was okay, just dealing with some communication problems that needed sorting out. The hardest call came from Tyler, Sarah's 16-year-old son. "Uncle Marlon." His voice cracked slightly, the way teenage boys' voices do when they're trying to sound more mature than they feel. "Mom's crying, and Dad's yelling, and nobody will tell me what's going on. Are you really not going to help Grandma and Grandpa anymore?" I sat down heavily, suddenly exhausted by the emotional weight of the situation. "Tyler, this is complicated adult stuff that isn't your fault and isn't your responsibility." "But Mom said you're being mean because she asked for help with the kitchen." "What did your mom tell you about the kitchen?" "She said Grandma and Grandpa's kitchen was dangerous, and you got mad when she spent her own money to fix it. She said you're punishing them because they can't pay you back right away." Another carefully crafted version of the truth, designed to make Tyler see me as the unreasonable villain in a simple story of family loyalty. Sarah had positioned herself as the selfless daughter who'd sacrificed her own money to help her parents, only to be attacked by her wealthy, heartless brother. "Tyler, I want you to know that I love you, and I love your grandparents. Sometimes adults have to make hard decisions about money and family, and those decisions can feel confusing from the outside. But whatever happens between the adults, it doesn't change how much I care about you." "Are you really not coming to the anniversary party?" "There might not be an anniversary party next month, but that doesn't mean we won't celebrate Grandma and Grandpa some other way." After I hung up, Jessica found me sitting in the living room staring out the window at our own well-maintained kitchen. We'd saved for 2 years to renovate it ourselves, doing most of the work on weekends to keep costs down. The irony wasn't lost on me that I'd been paying for Sarah's premium renovation while budgeting carefully for my own family's needs. "The insurance company called," Jessica said quietly, settling beside me on the couch. "Which one?" "Your parents' homeowner's insurance. The policy was canceled for non-payment. I felt a chill run down my spine. I've been paying their insurance premiums. I know. That's what I told them. They said the payments have been going to an intermediary for the past 8 months. Someone named Derek Hayes. Sarah's husband had been intercepting insurance payments meant for my parents' coverage. Money I'd sent specifically to keep them protected had been diverted somewhere else entirely. If the house had burned down, if Dad had fallen and injured himself, if any of dozens of potential disasters had occurred, my parents would have discovered they had no insurance coverage at all. This isn't just about a kitchen renovation anymore, I said. No, Jessica agreed. This is about your entire family being defrauded by your sister and her husband. And my parents either don't know or don't want to admit what's been happening. So what do we do? I looked at my wife, this woman who'd supported my family financially and emotionally for 10 years without complaint, who'd watched me stress over every family crisis and emergency, who'd adjusted our own budget repeatedly to accommodate my parents' needs. We get everyone together, and we have the conversation that should have happened years ago. The crisis reached its breaking point on Friday morning, when 3 phone calls arrived within 10 minutes of each other, each one more desperate than the last. First, Mom called crying so hard I could barely understand her words. Between sobs, I pieced together that the mortgage company had sent a certified letter about foreclosure proceedings. Dad was having chest pains from the stress, and she didn't know what to do. Second, Sarah called screaming about how I was destroying the family over money, how everyone would blame me if Dad had another heart attack, and how I was too stubborn and prideful to see the damage I was causing. Third, Uncle Robert called with a tone I'd never heard from him before. Cold, disappointed, angry. Marlon, I don't know what kind of power trip you're on, but cutting off your parents' financial support overnight is cruel beyond belief. Uncle Robert, you don't understand the full situation. I understand that your mother called me crying this morning because she doesn't know how they're going to keep their house. I understand that your father is stressed to the point of chest pains. And I understand that you're apparently willing to let them lose everything over some argument about a kitchen renovation. The family narrative was already being written, and I wasn't the hero. Sarah had positioned herself perfectly, making sure everyone knew that she'd tried to help improve their parents' living situation, only to be attacked by her ungrateful brother, who'd withdrawn all family support in retaliation. Uncle Robert, did you know that Sarah forged my signature to guarantee $18,000 in renovation work? Did you know that she and Derek have been intercepting insurance payments, while I thought I was keeping Mom and Dad protected? Silence. Then, that's a serious accusation. It's not an accusation. It's documented fact. I have forged guarantee forms and canceled insurance policies to prove it. More silence. When he spoke again, his tone was different, uncertain. If that's true, then we need to get to the bottom of this. That's exactly what I'm trying to do. By noon, the Extended Family Crisis Network was in full operation. Aunt Carol had driven over to check on my parents and found Dad sitting in his chair with his hand pressed to his chest, his face pale and drawn. She'd convinced Mom to call their doctor, who recommended they go to the emergency room if the chest pains continued. Cousin Patricia, the family accountant, had volunteered to review everyone's financial documents to help sort out the mess. She'd spent the morning with my parents, going through bank statements and payment records, trying to understand how their supposedly stable financial situation had collapsed so quickly. Sarah had mobilized her own support network, painting herself as the victim of a family feud that had gotten out of control. She'd called every relative she could think of, explaining that she'd used her own money to help their parents, and was now being accused of theft by a brother who'd always resented her close relationship with Mom and Dad. The narrative war was in full swing, with truth buried somewhere beneath layers of emotion, loyalty, and manipulation. At 2 o'clock, my phone rang with a number I didn't recognize. The voice on the other end was professional, crisp, and deeply concerning. Mr. Hayes, this is Margaret Chen from Lakeside Gardens Resort. I'm calling about your parents' anniversary celebration scheduled for next month. Yes. Sir, we've had several family members call about the status of this event, and I wanted to clarify the situation directly with you since you're listed as the financial guarantor. Another guarantor situation I'd never agreed to. I'm sorry, but I think there's been a misunderstanding. I never agreed to be a financial guarantor for my parents' anniversary celebration. Papers rustled on her end of the line. Sir, I have a signed agreement here with your name on it, guaranteeing payment for up to 60 guests, premium catering package, open bar and venue rental for 6 hours. What's the total cost? $8,500. I nearly dropped the phone. My parents had told everyone they were having a simple anniversary celebration. They'd been planning an elaborate resort party that cost more than most people's cars. Ms. Chen, I need to see that guarantee document. I believe it contains a forged signature. Sir, if you're claiming the signature is forged, I need to inform you that we've already invested considerable resources in preparing for this event. Our catering staff, our event coordinator, our service team have all been scheduled based on this guaranteed booking. I understand, and I'm not trying to create problems for your business. But I need to see the documentation before we can resolve the situation. I drove to Lakeside Gardens Resort that afternoon, with a growing sense of surreal disbelief. The venue was beautiful, exactly the kind of place my parents had always dreamed of having a celebration, but could never afford. Rolling lawns, a lake view, elegant pavilions designed for upscale events. Margaret Chen met me in the lobby with a thick folder of event planning documents. The guarantee form was on top, featuring another example of Sarah's carefully practiced forgery. This time, she'd gotten the signature almost perfect, but the date was wrong. According to the document, I'd signed it on a Tuesday, when I'd been in Chicago for a work conference 300 miles away from the resort. This signature is dated February 15th, I told Margaret. I was in Chicago that entire week for a business conference. I can provide documentation of my travel if needed. She studied the signature more closely, then consulted her computer. The reservation was made by phone initially with your sister, Sarah Hayes, calling to book the date. She said you would come in to sign the guarantee forms and provide payment information. Did Sarah sign anything herself? She signed the initial booking agreement as the event organizer, but all financial responsibility was assigned to you. Another perfect setup. Sarah had organized an expensive celebration that would reflect well on her as the devoted daughter, but she'd structured it so that all financial liability fell on me. When the bills came due, I would either pay them or be responsible for canceling my parents' dream anniversary celebration. Ms. Chen, I need you to understand that I never authorized this booking, never agreed to guarantee this event, and never signed any documents related to this celebration. Sir, this puts us in a very difficult position. We have vendor contracts, staffing commitments, and menu preparations already underway. I understand, and I want to be fair to your business. Can you provide me with a complete breakdown of costs already invested versus costs that could still be avoided if the event were canceled? She disappeared into the back office and returned with a detailed financial analysis. $3,000 in non-refundable deposits and preparations, $2,500 in costs that could be avoided with immediate cancellation, and $3,000 in costs that would be incurred regardless because of vendor commitments made based on the guaranteed booking. I wrote Margaret a check for $3,000 to cover the unavoidable costs, making it clear that this was a gesture of good faith to minimize the impact on her business, not an admission of liability for the forged guarantee. Driving home, I called Uncle Robert and Patricia to update them on what I'd discovered. The pattern was becoming impossible to ignore. Sarah had systematically committed my parents to financial obligations that required my support forging documents as needed to make the commitments official, then positioning herself as the family hero who was trying to make special things happen for our aging parents. This is bigger than we thought, Patricia said when I explained the venue situation. I've been going through your parents' paperwork this afternoon, and there are several other irregularities. What kind of irregularities? Credit card statements showing cash advances that your parents don't remember making. Utility bills that should have been paid by your automatic transfers, but show late fees and disconnection notices. Insurance policies that were supposed to be current, but show lapsed coverage. How much money are we talking about? I need more time to calculate everything, but based on what I've seen so far, somebody has been systematically draining money from accounts your parents thought were secure. By evening, the full scope of the financial manipulation was becoming clear. Sarah hadn't just forged a few guarantee forms to fund a kitchen renovation. She'd created an elaborate system of financial commitments that required constant infusions of money to maintain, with all ultimate responsibility falling on me, while all credit for family generosity flowing to her. My parents weren't just victims of their daughter's deception. They were unwitting participants in a fraud that had been designed to extract as much money as possible from their son, while allowing their daughter to maintain the illusion of being the family's primary caregiver and financial savior. The anniversary celebration, the kitchen renovation, the insurance premiums, the credit card, advances, the emergency loans that never got repaid. All of it connected. All of it planned. All of it designed to make me pay while making Sarah look good. And it had been working perfectly until I'd finally said no. Uncle Robert organized the family meeting for Sunday afternoon at his house, inviting everyone who had a stake in resolving what he now called the Hayes family financial crisis. By the time I arrived, cars lined both sides of his street. Aunt Carol, Cousin Patricia, Cousin Mike and his wife Linda, even Great-Aunt Dorothy had driven down from Fort Collins. The living room felt like a courtroom with family members arranged in a rough circle around the coffee table. My parents sat on the main couch, looking smaller and more fragile than I'd ever seen them. Mom's hands shook slightly as she held a tissue while Dad stared at the floor with his shoulders hunched forward. Sarah and Derek occupied the love seat near the window, Derek's face flushed and defiant, while Sarah maintained her composure with the practiced ease of someone who'd been preparing for this confrontation. Tyler sat beside them, his teenage awkwardness amplified by the adult tension surrounding him. Before we start, Uncle Robert announced, "I want everyone to understand that we're here to find solutions, not assign blame. This family has been through enough turmoil this week." Patricia cleared her throat and opened a thick folder. "I've spent the last 3 days reviewing financial documents from both sides of the situation. What I've found is concerning enough that I felt obligated to prepare a formal analysis." She distributed copies of a typed report to everyone in the room. The numbers were stark and undeniable. Over 3 years, $38,000 intended for my parents' essential expenses had been redirected to Sarah's various projects. Credit cards co-signed for emergencies had been used for cash advances totaling $26,000, with the money unaccounted for. Insurance payments had been intercepted for 8 months, leaving my parents unknowingly uninsured. The total amount of financial irregularities, Patricia concluded, comes to approximately $64,000. The room fell silent. Aunt Carol's hand went to her mouth. Cousin Mike whistled low under his breath. Great-Aunt Dorothy shook her head slowly from side to side. Derek's face went from flushed to pale. "Now wait just a minute. You can't just throw around numbers like that without context." "What context would justify forging guarantee documents?" Uncle Robert asked. "Nobody forged anything," Sarah said quickly. "Marlon approved all of these projects. He just doesn't want to admit it now that things got complicated." I reached into my briefcase and pulled out the various forged documents I'd collected during the week. The kitchen guarantee, the deck guarantee, the anniversary venue guarantee. I placed them on the coffee table, alongside samples of my actual signature from legitimate documents. "These signatures were forged," I said simply. "Anyone can see the differences if they look closely." Patricia had anticipated this moment. She'd brought a magnifying glass and pointed out the specific inconsistencies in each forged signature. The M that was too angular, the Y that was too compressed, the overall slant that was slightly off from my natural handwriting. Furthermore, Patricia continued, I've verified that Marlon was out of state when two of these documents were allegedly signed, and the third was supposedly signed at a time when he was in a documented meeting at his office. Sarah's composure began to crack. This is ridiculous. You're all acting like I'm some kind of criminal because I tried to help our parents. Help them by stealing from your brother. Aunt Carol's voice was sharp with disappointment. I didn't steal anything. Marlon has plenty of money. He can afford to help the family. I was just making sure Mom and Dad got the help they needed without having to beg for it. By forging his signature on guarantee documents, Uncle Robert pressed. By handling family business the way families are supposed to handle it. Derek suddenly stood up his chair, scraping against the hardwood floor. I can't listen to this anymore. Sarah did what she had to do, because Marlon was never around when the real work needed to be done. What real work? I asked. Taking Mom to doctor appointments, dealing with Dad's medication issues, handling the contractors when things broke down, being here when they needed someone, not just sending money, and thinking that makes you a good son. Derek. Dad's voice was quiet but firm. Sit down. No. I'm tired of watching everyone pile on Sarah like she's the bad guy. She's been busting her ass for your parents while Marlon plays suburban dad and writes checks. Derek. This time it was Sarah who spoke, her voice carrying a warning. But Derek was beyond warnings. 3 years of financial pressure, of scrambling to cover Sarah's schemes, of watching his wife manipulate her family while he dealt with the consequences, had apparently reached a breaking point. You want to know where the money went? He shouted. You want to know what your precious Sarah has been doing? Fine. I'll tell you. Derek, stop. Sarah's mask was completely gone now, replaced by panic. She's been covering for my gambling debts. The casino loans, the credit card advances, the money from your parents' accounts. All of it went to pay back what I owed, because I couldn't stop betting on sports. The room erupted. Uncle Robert demanded details. Aunt Carol started crying. My mother made a sound like she'd been physically struck. Tyler jumped up and ran outside, slamming the front door behind him. Derek collapsed back into his chair, his head in his hands. $25,000 in gambling debts over 2 years. Every time Sarah found a way to get money from the family, it went straight to covering what I owed. So the kitchen renovation? I asked. Real project, but it didn't need to cost $18,000. Sarah upgraded everything to justify taking more money than the actual work required. The extra $6,000 went to my creditors. The anniversary celebration. Sarah's idea to create a financial crisis that would force you to pay for everything. She figured you'd rather write a check than let your parents' big celebration get canceled. The insurance payments. Derek's voice dropped to a whisper. I was supposed to forward them to the insurance company, but I kept using the money for gambling. I kept telling myself I'd win it back and catch up the payments before anyone noticed. Sarah sat frozen, her face white with shock and betrayal. Her husband had just destroyed the carefully constructed narrative she'd spent years building, revealing her not as the devoted daughter making sacrifices for family, but as an accomplice to theft, motivated by enabling her husband's addiction. Sarah, Mom's voice was barely audible. How could you do this to us? I was trying to protect everyone, Sarah whispered. Derek was in trouble, you needed help, and Marlon had money. I thought I could fix it all without anyone getting hurt. By lying to everyone. By handling problems before they became crises. Uncle Robert shook his head slowly. Sarah, you created the crises. Everything that's happened this week, all the stress and panic and family conflict happened because you built a house of cards that was bound to fall down. Patricia consulted her notes again. Based on what Derek just revealed, I need to revise my analysis. The $64,000 in irregularities was actually funding gambling debts, not family improvements. What does that mean legally? Cousin Mike asked. It means this isn't just about family financial disagreements anymore. Forged guarantee documents, intercepted payments, and fraudulent use of co-signed credit cards could constitute criminal fraud. The weight of that word hung in the air. Criminal fraud. This wasn't a family dispute that could be resolved with apologies and payment plans. Sarah had committed crimes that could result in prosecution, and Derek's gambling addiction had been the motivation behind it all. Uncle Robert stood up slowly. "I think we need to take a break and let everyone process what we've just learned." As family members began to file out making plans to reconvene later in the week, I found myself sitting alone with my parents on Uncle Robert's couch. The room felt hollow and sad, filled with the echoes of revelations that had shattered our understanding of the past 3 years. "I'm sorry, son," Dad said finally. "For what?" "For not seeing what was happening. For believing Sarah's explanations when things didn't add up. For letting you pay for problems that weren't real while thinking you were helping us." Mom reached over and took my hand. "We thought we were keeping the family together by not asking too many questions. But we were actually helping tear it apart," Dad concluded. Outside, I could see Tyler sitting on the front steps, his head in his hands. Sarah and Derek were having an intense conversation beside their car, her gestures sharp and angry, while he stood with his shoulders slumped in defeat. 3 years of deception were unraveling in a single afternoon, and everyone was discovering that the family dynamics we'd all accepted as normal had actually been built on a foundation of lies, manipulation, and addiction. The truth had finally emerged, but the damage would take much longer to repair. The confrontation I'd been dreading came 2 days later, when Sarah showed up at my office without warning. My assistant buzzed me at 3 o'clock to say that my sister was in the lobby, insisting she needed to speak with me immediately about urgent family business. I found her pacing near the reception desk, her usually perfect appearance disheveled. Her hair was pulled back in a messy ponytail, her makeup was smeared, and she wore the same clothes I'd seen her in at Uncle Robert's house 2 days earlier. "We need to talk," she said without preamble. "Somewhere private." I led her to the small conference room we used for client meetings, closing the door behind us. For several minutes we sat across from each other in silence, the weight of everything that had been revealed hanging between us like a physical presence. "Derek's in rehab," she finally said. "Good, he needs help. Gambling addiction treatment program in Colorado Springs. 90 days minimum, possibly longer depending on his progress." I nodded, not sure what response she was looking for. "The house is going up for sale," she continued. "We've already talked to a realtor. Should be listed by the end of the week." "Sarah." "Let me finish." Her voice cracked slightly. "I've calculated what we can realistically pay back. The house should bring enough to cover the renovation costs, the venue deposits, and most of the credit card debt. It won't cover everything, but it's a start." She pulled a folded paper from her purse and slid it across the table. It was a handwritten breakdown of debts and assets, with proposed payment schedules for everything she couldn't cover immediately. "Tyler's going to live with his father during Derek's treatment. My ex-husband has been wanting more time with him anyway, and this way, Tyler doesn't have to deal with all the chaos while I sort out this mess." I studied the paper, impressed, despite everything, by the thoroughness of her planning. She'd thought through the practical implications of dismantling the life she'd built on borrowed money and false promises. "What about you? Where will you live?" Mom and Dad offered me their spare bedroom until I can find something affordable. Ironic, considering I've been taking money from them for years, but they're still willing to help me clean up my mistakes. That sounds like Mom and Dad. They're better people than I am. We sat in silence again, the air conditioning humming in the background while office sounds drifted through the walls. Sarah looked older than I'd ever seen her, as if the stress of maintaining her deceptions for 3 years had finally caught up with her all at once. "I need to ask you something," she said. "And I need you to be honest with me." "Okay. Are you going to press charges?" The question I'd been avoiding for 2 days. Patricia had made it clear that Sarah's actions constituted criminal fraud. The forged signatures, the intercepted payments, the fraudulent use of my credit co-signature, all provided grounds for prosecution. But criminal charges would mean court dates, testimony, public records, and the permanent destruction of any possibility for family reconciliation. "I don't know," I said honestly. I understand if you do. I understand if you can't forgive what I did. But I need you to know that I never intended for things to go this far. When did it start? She leaned back in her chair, staring at the ceiling. Derek's gambling started about 4 years ago. Small stuff at first: fantasy football leagues, office pools, friendly poker games. Then he discovered online sports betting. When did you find out? About 3 years ago, when the credit card bills started arriving. $20,000 charged to accounts I didn't know existed. He broke down, promised to get help, swore it would never happen again. But it did. It got worse. The debts got bigger, the creditors got more aggressive, and Derek got more desperate. He started borrowing from dangerous people, taking cash advances at higher and higher interest rates. So you started taking money from the family to cover his debts. I started finding ways to redirect money that was already flowing through the family. You were sending mom and dad money for emergencies and extra expenses anyway. I just made sure some of those emergencies required more money than they actually cost. And the forged signatures. Sarah's face flushed with shame. Derek found out about your co-signature on the credit cards and suggested I could use your name to guarantee other projects. He said it wasn't really fraud because you were family and would help anyway if you knew how desperate things were. But I didn't know how desperate things were because you never told me. I was ashamed. My husband was destroying our financial life. My marriage was falling apart, and I couldn't admit to my successful brother that I'd lost control of everything. So instead, you made me an unwilling accomplice to theft. I told myself I was protecting everyone. Derek from his creditors, you from having to worry about more family financial problems, mom and dad from knowing how bad things really were, and yourself from having to face the consequences. She nodded miserably. And myself from having to face the consequences. I looked at the payment plan she'd prepared with its carefully calculated schedules and realistic timelines. Even selling her house and liquidating everything she owned, it would take her years to fully repay what she'd taken. Sarah, I need you to understand something. This isn't just about the money. I know. You destroyed trust. Not just my trust in you, but trust throughout the entire family. Mom and Dad don't know what to believe anymore. Uncle Robert is questioning every family financial interaction for the past decade. Cousin Patricia is wondering if she missed signs of fraud in other situations. I know. Tyler's relationship with his grandparents is damaged because he watched his mother manipulate them. Your relationship with your own parents is damaged because they don't know if they can believe anything you tell them. Sarah began crying quiet tears that she didn't bother to wipe away. I know I destroyed everything. I know sorry doesn't fix it. I know paying the money back doesn't undo the damage. Then what are you asking me? I'm asking for a chance to try to make it right. Not to erase what I did, but to show that I can be honest going forward. To prove that the person who did these things isn't the person I want to be. I thought about Tyler, confused and angry at the adult world that had suddenly revealed itself to be built on lies. I thought about my parents, wondering if they could trust their own judgment anymore. I thought about Derek, fighting an addiction that had dragged everyone around him into its destructive wake. I'm not going to press charges, I said finally. Sarah's relief was visible, her shoulders sagging as tension left her body. But I continued, there are conditions. She straightened up, ready to accept whatever requirements I might impose. First, you pay back every dollar according to the schedule you've outlined. No exceptions, no excuses, no requests for modifications based on hardship. Agreed. Second, you attend Gamblers Anonymous meetings with Derek when he gets out of treatment. Addiction affected both of you, and you both need to understand how it contributed to these choices. Agreed. Third, complete financial transparency with the family. Bank statements, credit reports, income documentation. You rebuild trust by proving you have nothing to hide. Agreed. And fourth, you apologize personally to everyone who was affected. Not a general apology to the family, but individual conversations with Mom, Dad, Tyler, Uncle Robert, everyone who had to deal with the consequences of your choices. I can do that. I stood up and walked to the window, looking down at the street below where normal people were going about their normal lives, dealing with normal problems that didn't involve fraud and family betrayal. Sarah, I need you to understand that forgiveness and trust are different things. I can forgive you because you're my sister and I love you. But trusting you again will take time and consistent proof that you've changed. I understand. The family relationships you damaged may never fully heal. Some people might never look at you the same way again. I understand. And if you ever do anything like this again, I will press charges. No second chances, no family loyalty, no consideration for the consequences. Are we clear? We're clear. 6 months later, I stood in my parents' backyard, watching my daughters chase their cousin Tyler around the newly repaired swing set. The anniversary celebration had finally happened, held at a community center, instead of an expensive resort paid for collectively by family members who wanted to honor Mom and Dad's 50 years together. Sarah moved through the gathering quietly, helping with food preparation and cleanup, speaking when spoken to, but not dominating conversations the way she used to. Derek was still in treatment, his recovery progressing slowly but steadily, according to the updates Sarah shared during our monthly check-ins about her repayment progress. The financial damage was being repaired systematically. Sarah's house had sold for enough to cover the major debts, and she was working 2 part-time jobs to meet her monthly repayment obligations. My parents had established new financial boundaries, accepting my help only for agreed-upon expenses with clear documentation and no intermediaries. Tyler had chosen to stay with his father, permanently visiting Sarah and his grandparents on weekends and holidays. The stability of his father's household provided the consistency he needed, while the adult chaos in his life got sorted out. Trust was slowly being rebuilt through transparency and consistency. Sarah's financial reports arrived on schedule each month. Her apologies to family members had been genuine and specific, acknowledging the particular ways her actions had affected each person. Her attendance at support meetings with Derek was helping both of them understand the destructive patterns they'd fallen into. The family dynamics were different now. Less automatic support, more honest communication, clearer boundaries about money and responsibility. Some relationships had been permanently altered, but others had grown stronger through the process of confronting hard truths and working together to rebuild what had been broken. 1 year after the crisis that nearly destroyed our family, I found myself sitting in the same suburban Denver restaurant, where I'd had countless family dinners over the years. This time, though, the gathering felt different. Hopeful in ways I hadn't expected possible during those dark weeks when everything was falling apart. Sarah sat across from me, her appearance transformed by a year of honest work and consistent sleep. The stress lines that had aged her face during the crisis had softened, replaced by a quieter confidence that came from facing her mistakes instead of running from them. Her final payment schedule showed she'd be debt-free within 6 months ahead of her original timeline. Tyler made honor roll again, she said, showing me his latest report card on her phone. His father says he's been talking about maybe studying business in college, wants to understand how money really works. That's fantastic. Is he planning to visit this weekend? Saturday afternoon. He's excited about showing Grandpa his science fair project. She paused, stirring cream into her coffee. Derek's been clean for 8 months now. The counselors think he's ready for supervised visits with Tyler soon. How do you feel about that? Nervous, hopeful, realistic. She smiled slightly. I've learned the difference between hoping for the best and expecting miracles. Through the window, I could see my parents' house across the street. The kitchen renovation had been completed properly 6 months earlier, paid for with funds from Sarah's house sale, and done by Jake Thompson's crew at actual cost, instead of inflated prices. The result was modest, but functional, exactly what my parents needed, instead of what Sarah had thought would impress the family. I've been thinking about something, Sarah continued, about the anniversary celebration and how everything happened. What about it? I spent so much energy trying to make myself look like the perfect daughter that I forgot how to actually be a good daughter. All those elaborate plans and expensive gestures were about making me feel important, not about making mom and dad happy. And now I help dad with his physical therapy exercises twice a week. I drive mom to her book club meetings. I fix the little things that break around the house. It's not glamorous, but it's real. Our conversation was interrupted by Jessica, arriving with Emma and Sophie fresh from their piano lessons, and bubbling with excitement about an upcoming recital. The girls hugged their aunt enthusiastically, their relationship with Sarah uncomplicated by the adult complications that had temporarily fractured our family. "Aunt Sarah, are you coming to our recital next month?" Emma asked. "I wouldn't miss it for the world, sweetheart." "Mom said you've been practicing piano again too," Sophie added. "Maybe we could play a duet sometime." Sarah's eyes brightened with genuine pleasure. "I'd love that. I'm pretty rusty, but I think I remember enough to keep up with you two." As the girls ran off to play in the restaurant's small arcade area, Jessica settled beside me with a smile that told me she approved of the progress she was witnessing. The family healing had been slow and sometimes painful, but it was real, and it was lasting. "Patricia called yesterday," Jessica said. "She wanted to thank us again for referring that fraud prevention workshop to her accounting firm." Sarah looked puzzled. "Fraud prevention workshop?" "Patricia's been developing presentations about financial fraud in family situations," I explained. "Helping other families recognize the warning signs before things get as bad as they did with us. She's using our situation as a case study, with everyone's permission and with all names changed to protect privacy. Apparently, family financial fraud is more common than most people realize." Sarah was quiet for a moment, processing the idea that our painful experience might help prevent similar situations for other families. "I'm glad something positive can come from the mess I created," she said finally. "It wasn't just your mess," I replied. "We all played parts in letting the situation develop. I ignored warning signs because it was easier than confronting problems. Mom and Dad enabled questionable behavior because they didn't want to believe their daughter was capable of deception. Uncle Robert and the others assumed everything was fine because the family appeared to be functioning normally. But I was the one who made the choices that hurt everyone. Yes, but healing required all of us to change how we handle family financial relationships. Derek's rehabilitation had taught us that addiction affects entire family systems, not just the addicted individual. Everyone around the addiction adapts their behavior in ways that can enable destructive patterns to continue. Breaking those patterns required everyone to learn new ways of communicating and setting boundaries. The family financial meetings we held quarterly now were initially awkward, but had become natural and helpful. Instead of one person quietly handling all family financial support, we discussed needs and resources, openly made decisions collectively, and maintained clear documentation of all agreements. Tyler had become an enthusiastic participant in these meetings, asking questions about budgets and savings and long-term financial planning. His curiosity about money management was partly motivated by wanting to understand how his parents' financial situation had become so problematic, but also by genuine interest in learning skills he'd need as an adult. "He's asked to spend next summer working at Uncle Robert's construction company," Sarah said. "Wants to learn what it feels like to earn money through honest work." That sounds like a great opportunity for him. Robert says Tyler reminds him of you at that age. Serious about learning, willing to work hard, asking thoughtful questions about how things really work. As we prepared to leave the restaurant, Sarah reached into her purse and pulled out a sealed envelope. "This is for you," she said, handing it to me. Inside was a check for $800 and a handwritten note. "Final payment 2 months ahead of schedule." The note read, "Thank you for giving me the chance to make this right. Thank you for not giving up on our family even when we gave up on ourselves." I looked up to find Sarah watching me nervously. "You didn't have to finish early," I said. "I wanted to. I needed to know that I could exceed my commitments instead of just meeting them." I needed to prove to myself that I could be someone who keeps promises instead of someone who breaks them. We walked across the street to my parents' house where Mom was preparing dinner, and Dad was reading in his chair by the window. The scene was peaceful and normal in ways that had seemed impossible during the crisis. Dad looked up as we entered, his face brightening with the genuine pleasure of seeing his family gathered together. "Perfect timing," he announced. "I just finished reading about this investment opportunity your Uncle Robert mentioned. Thought we could discuss it during dinner." Sarah and I exchanged glances, both of us immediately alert to potential problems. But Dad continued with a smile. "Don't worry, nothing gets decided without our quarterly family meeting. I just like to research things ahead of time, so I can ask intelligent questions." The change in his approach to financial decisions reflected the broader changes our family had made. More communication, better planning, healthy skepticism about opportunities that seemed too good to be true. During dinner, Tyler called from his father's house to tell his grandparents about his science fair project, his excitement audible even through the speakerphone. His relationship with his mother had stabilized into something honest and supportive, built on truth instead of the manipulation and secrecy that had characterized their interactions during the crisis. After dinner, I found myself standing in my parents' backyard with Jessica, watching Sarah help Mom with the dishes through the kitchen window. The renovated kitchen looked warm and inviting, a space designed for family gatherings rather than impressing visitors. "Do you think she's really changed?" Jessica asked. "I think she's changing. Recovery isn't a destination, it's an ongoing process. But yes, I believe she's committed to being different than she was." And Derek? Still working on it. His addiction counselor says gambling addiction has one of the highest relapse rates. But Derek seems to understand the stakes this time. He knows his relationship with Tyler depends on staying clean. What about Tyler? How's he handling all the changes? Better than any of us expected. His fathers provided stability, while everything else was chaotic. And now he gets to have relationships with his mother and stepfather that are based on honesty instead of secrets. As we prepared to leave, Sarah walked us to the car, her demeanor relaxed in a way I hadn't seen since we were children. "Marlon," she said, as I opened the driver's door. "I know I tell you this every month, but I need to say it again. Thank you for not pressing charges. Thank you for giving me the chance to make amends, instead of just punishing me. You're my sister. Family means we help each other learn from mistakes, instead of destroying each other for making them. Even when the mistakes hurt everyone around them. Especially then, punishment without the possibility of redemption doesn't heal anyone. I won't waste this second chance." "I know you won't." Driving home, Emma fell asleep in her car seat, while Sophie chattered about her upcoming piano recital. Jessica reached over to squeeze my hand, a gesture that had become our shorthand for acknowledging how grateful we were that our family had survived its crisis stronger instead of broken. The past year had taught us that family loyalty doesn't mean enabling destructive behavior or avoiding difficult conversations. Real family loyalty means protecting each other from harmful patterns, even when that protection requires painful confrontations and significant changes. Setting boundaries hadn't destroyed our family relationships. It had saved them. By refusing to continue funding Sarah's deception, I'd forced a crisis that revealed the truth and created the possibility for genuine healing. The anniversary celebration that had started this whole crisis finally happened 8 months later than originally planned. Instead of an expensive resort party designed to impress relatives, we held a simple gathering in Uncle Robert's backyard. The focus was on celebrating Mom and Dad's 50 years together, not on demonstrating anyone's financial success or family devotion. Tyler played guitar, while the family sang his music, providing the soundtrack for a celebration built on truth instead of pretense. Sarah helped coordinate the food and decorations, her contributions valued, but not central to the event's success. Derek participated via video call from his treatment facility, his presence welcome, but not essential to the family's happiness. The life lesson that emerged from our crisis was both simple and profound. True family strength comes from facing problems together, not from protecting each other from the consequences of bad choices. Love sometimes requires saying no. Support sometimes means letting people experience the results of their actions. And forgiveness becomes possible only when honesty replaces deception. My daughters are growing up in a family that models healthy financial boundaries, open communication about money, and the understanding that generosity must be balanced with accountability. They're learning that family loyalty means helping each other become better people, not enabling each other's worst impulses. Sarah has rebuilt her life on a foundation of honest work and transparent relationships. Derek continues his recovery with the support of people who understand that addiction is a disease requiring ongoing management, not a moral failing requiring perpetual punishment. Tyler is learning what healthy family relationships look like while maintaining connections with everyone who loves him. And I've learned that sometimes the most loving thing you can do for someone is refuse to participate in their self-destruction. Setting boundaries isn't abandonment, it's love in action. The family gathering that could have been our last became the beginning of our healing. The crisis that seemed designed to destroy us ultimately made us stronger, more honest, and more genuinely connected than we'd been in years. As I write this story, I'm reminded that every family faces moments when they must choose between comfortable lies and difficult truths. The easy path is often enabling destructive patterns because confrontation feels too risky. But real family strength is built through surviving challenges together, not avoiding them. To anyone facing similar family financial manipulation or addiction issues, setting boundaries doesn't make you heartless. Demanding honesty doesn't make you unsympathetic. And sometimes, the most profound act of love is refusing to enable someone's worst impulses even when that refusal causes immediate pain. Have you ever had to set difficult boundaries with family members to protect everyone's long-term well-being? What did you learn about the difference between enabling and supporting? I'd love to hear your thoughts and experiences in the comments below. Thank you for listening to this difficult but ultimately hopeful story about family money and the courage required to choose truth over comfort. If this story resonated with you, please like this video, subscribe for more family stories that explore real-life challenges and solutions, and share this with anyone who might benefit from understanding how families can heal from financial betrayal. Remember, sometimes the hardest conversations lead to the most beautiful transformations.